All right, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to the broadcast. We are live with Jeff, Johnny, and Lee. Jeff, how are you, sir?
Okay so far?
That's good to hear. Johnny, how are you?
Tired, but alive.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. It's always better to be above rather than below.
Yes.
So, as you folks can see, I am broadcasting live from the Intimidator here this afternoon for Jeff, Johnny, and Lee. And there is a lot going on in the world today, even more so than usual. The Ukrainians have been hard at work overnight, as well as the Russians. Where do you guys want to start, with what the Russians did in Poland or what Ukraine has done to the Russian Navy? I mean, there's so much to talk about.
Well, let's start with what happened last night with Russia and Poland. This is not the first time that this has happened, but it's the first time that it's happened officially. A cruise missile crossed the border last night by about 100 kilometers. That's one hell of a way to get off target, so to speak. 100 kilometers in, a cruise missile came across from the Ukrainian side. F-16s were scrambled by the Poles to go up and get it. The cruise missile disappeared from radar, and then it crashed in a farm field outside of Lublin.
Particularly this one.
Yeah, left a nice little crater there. And you said there were two.
Yes, it's reported that there were two missiles. The other one hasn't been located as of yet, as far as I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, so they haven't found the second one, or they have found it and they're not saying.
It's one or the other. They detected two on radar. They scrambled jets. Air raid sirens went off. Then they came out and said that a missile or a cruise missile, whatever it had hit in this field, but they haven't said anything more about the second one. Tusk said something earlier today, but...
Yes, of course he did. I don't believe a word he says. But no, I would have expected a lot more vocal outrage about this. I mean, you heard some from Radoslaw Sikorski, of course, but I've not really heard much of anything. I've not heard anything out of... Has NATO even said anything? I don't think they have.
NATO did respond earlier. In fact, I had a copy of that, but I'm not seeing it here now. They just said that they were upset. Mark Rutte discussed with Donald Tusk the violation of Poland's airspace by a Russian missile. Poland and NATO activated their air and ground defenses. We stand in solidarity with Poland and will continue to strengthen our readiness to defend against any threat, including missile attacks. This incident is yet another reckless act by Russia and a dangerous consequence of its war against Ukraine. I condemn last night's deadly strikes across Ukraine. NATO continues to provide essential support so Ukraine can defend itself. Our commitment is unwavering. And that was from Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I mean, what else? This is the kind of thing that he said before. But, different individual countries are what's doing things. Like Germany, America is doing some things too. But Europe is now giving most of the support to Ukraine at the moment. Although Congress, they did some kind of it wasn't really passed. It was a vote to see if people would vote for it. For, what was it, 400 million to the Ukrainians?
It was 400 million, yes, part of the package that was going to be put through. I'm sorry, it wasn't that. I think that was actually worked into the defense budget. So whatever was in the budget going forward.
I see.
400 million was allocated to Ukraine. However, Trump says that money will not be spent until 2029.
Yeah. See, the thing is, he's against spending money. See, and 400 million is nothing. You got to understand, it's like less than a penny of your tax dollar. Some fraction of a penny that we're giving from our tax dollar. So it's not very much. It's not significant. But Trump even begrudges them that. You know, I had a French critic say, "Well, now are you going to, suddenly be a lover of Trump?" And I'm not a hater of Trump. I'm just a critic of Trump. I'm just saying what is the truth about him. He begrudges helping Ukraine. And it seems to come out in these kind of measures.
I was actually saying that, to the part of that, I was actually saying that on Tuesday. I said that about Trump, I said his domestic stuff I really don't have too much of an issue with, as opposed to the international stuff. When it comes to these issues with Iran, I want to talk about Iran today, with what's going on with that, because finally the French are saying, this oil thing with the Strait of Hormuz, this is causing us a real serious problem.
And they have nuclear power, by the way, in France, so they're not quite as in bad shape as some other countries.
Yeah. So, I mean, to the Trump point, I supported the guy in the last 3 times that he's made a presidential run.
Yeah, me too.
And because it's, as you put it before, it's certainly better than what the alternative would have been.
Yeah,
by far.
So like a communist like Kamala Harris.
Yeah. But my main issue with him is the fact that we're ruining decades of alliances with friendly countries.
Yes.
And we're doing business still with our adversaries. The whole trip with China. Okay, I remember back in 2000 and I think it was 2007, 2008. Back then, I remember Trump was extremely vocal about America's doing business with China. Even back then, long before he ever decided that he was going to run for president. This is back when Obama was in office, and he was going off about it then, saying that it was just a terrible idea and we've got to stop this and this has to be shut down. But yet, here he is taking all of our business people to China. And that wasn't known until they were almost crossing into Chinese airspace. That wasn't even announced. That was just, there's another plane behind us full of all of our business leaders. And they're going to do business with China. We're going to sell some Boeings while we're there, and we're going to make a nice time of it. No, Mr. President, what you should have done was slammed the phone down on the Chinese, gotten all of our business leaders together, and taken a trip across the other pond, across the Atlantic, and done business and made business deals with our partners and our allies and our defense-packed countries in Europe. That's what should have happened.
And we should have made those deals, with part of the deal being they don't do business with China either.
That's right.
That everybody gets detached from China. Yeah, absolutely right. Trump misrepresented himself in the past by posing as an anti-China trade person. This isn't just hypocrisy. This is misrepresentation. This is fraud, which we see in all of his presentations, by the way. He presents himself as a strong leader who is going to pound anybody into the dirt, right? And he lies constantly, especially about the effectiveness of his strategies. So we're directing the Venezuelan oil. Well, it's only 1.25 million barrels a day coming out of Venezuela. He lost the Middle East. So it's not a fair trade, right? He does one thing that works out, and those Venezuelans, the minute they feel that they can do a drone war on us, the same way the Iranians did, that oil is not going to go the way we direct it. And China's just getting their oil out of the Middle East. They don't need the Venezuelan oil if they can get it out of Kuwait and Iraq, where they control oil fields in Iraq. Well, how do we conquered Iraq so that China could control Iraqi oil fields? China and Russia control the Iraqi oil fields. How do we do that? That is completely stupid strategy. We spent trillions there, and they get the oil fields? Their companies get to exploit those oil fields? I'm sorry, but this is just completely because why? We've got people over here, so the American oil companies are evil. They don't deserve to have any of that. What
This is part of the thing. And to the Iraq oil, you can't throw because of the time. We can't throw Trump under the bus completely for that one.
Well, people say you can't. Look. So Jeff, you're throwing. We have to back Trump because he's the only guy we've got. And if we don't back Trump, we're going to end up with the Democrats. Well, yeah, of course. if Trump
Yeah.
is running against an outright communist like Kamala Harris, who grew up a red diaper baby, who went to school when she was 7, 8 years old, going to a little commie school, a little commie program, I should say, whose parents were founders of the Black Panther Party. No, I'm going to vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for the lesser of two evils, but it doesn't mean he's a good guy. Because that's the only choice we got, and I'm going to make the better choice, which is the lesser of two evils. But he's still an evil. Yes, of course. And if he were not term limited, and he were running again, I would support him again. You know, that's just it. If he's running against a communist, I hate communists. I don't trust Donald Trump, and I would prefer someone better than Trump. But the Republican Party and our republic is incapable of coming up with anybody better and getting them into office. The system is breaking down. And now you see this thing with the blanket, the blanket pardons. Imagine that I want to kill a bunch of people and I get a blanket pardon. Can I run around and then murder them all and say, look, the president gave me a blanket pardon? Pardoning people before they've been convicted.
It doesn't cover after the pardon is written. But if you went around and murdered a bunch of people for the president and then he wrote you a pardon, that would be different. The pardon isn't active after the date. Fauci has not been convicted of anything, and he's got a pardon from Biden. How does that work? Well, there's a lot of people that have pardons from Biden. That's a long list. Yeah. See, the thing is that, but you see, how can you pardon a person when they haven't been convicted of a crime? I can't believe. I want to hear from a constitutional lawyer that a pardon to a person who hasn't been convicted of a crime can be a pardon for anything. You can't. I've already researched that. Oh, have you? Yeah, you can't. How does it work? You can't. You can't write a pardon for something that somebody hasn't been charged with, or a blanket pardon. And in addition to that, they were all signed with an auto pen, which means that they're also no good because an auto penned pardon is worthless. It has to be physically signed by the president. I would expect that. And see, but the administration, the Trump administration, is saying that they're going to respect Biden's pardon of Fauci. For Fauci? Oh, yes. I saw the president. He's in the Oval Office and he's saying, we're going to respect this, because Biden did this. Why? Because he wants to he's promising blanket pardons to all of his staff so that they can, they can end run the Constitution or the law, and then he can give a blanket pardon. And then he's expecting the Democrats, when they get into power, to respect that one, because if anybody then doesn't respect it, they all go to jail, right? I mean, what kind of government is this? Government by fake pardons and blackmail? Where's the problem? You say all of them go to jail, okay. Yeah, I know. There's no problem is they all want this as being accepted by the system, that you see, because if the president controls, appoints the attorney general, he says to the attorney general, we're not going to prosecute Fauci because Biden pardoned him, because when the Democrats are in, we want them to respect all the pardons we give out. So what that is that's destroying the accountability of government, right? Right, Lee? Yeah, it is, but where is that? I haven't heard that Trump is going to issue pardons to his staff. Well, it was in the news today that and maybe it's a rumor, saying that he's telling his staff, don't worry, we're going to give you all blanket pardons at the end of the administration. Yeah, I hadn't seen that. Yeah. So why would you even say that to your staff? It's like, your staff doesn't consult a lawyer before they decide if what they're going to do is illegal, because they know they're going to get a blanket pardon. I mean, it's absurd way to run government. Okay. If that's the way you want to run your government, go to Russia. That's how they run theirs. That's where we're headed. We're headed to a totalitarian state with that. Yeah. You're going to end up with Julius Caesar, a form of Julius Caesar, or Joseph Stalin. Right. Well, we finished the. I suppose we were done with the. Somehow or another, we started with a missile strike on Poland. We ended up there. Yeah. I want to talk about the Russian oil capacity, as in their production capacity. I'm hearing conflicting things. I'm hearing, Lee, you and I were talking before we started. At the moment, they're 65% offline. But Jeff, you're saying you're hearing that they're recovering.
So
I'm hearing that I'm
is.
hearing that they're putting back online some of the things that have been hit before, and I don't know which is true, but it seems that at least in their depiction, the depiction of the suffering in Russia over not having enough refined fuel, it seems to not be as bad, but I don't know. It's because I'm not there on the ground.
I have stopped seeing the lines for fuel, so
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that anymore. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not happening.
Well, that's partly
but-
because they're doing rationing, and you can only get so many gallons on so many days. So if you
Yeah.
can only get gas on Mondays and Wednesdays, or Mondays and Thursdays, and you're only allowed 3 gallons, there's not going to be much of a line.
It prevents the
That's
lines.
true.
Yeah.
And
If they
also,
manage
if,
it that way,
if it's completely gone, because we've heard of stations just completely, they're just dry. So you are not going to have any lines, obviously, if there's nothing there, right? Everybody's just going to leave.
So but you see, how can we correctly interpret? See, the thing is about Russia is that they stockpile spare parts because they expect to cause trouble and expect to be embargoed. So have they stockpiled the parts to put their refineries back into action? I mean, is that possible? That they're putting some of these refineries back?
The only thing that makes me question it is the distillation units, because of the metallurgical makeup in them. The fact that we have to specifically grow those things, grow the metals that go on the inside, and that takes time. It takes anywhere between 3 and 5 years to get one of these things produced, and you're on a waiting list even longer than that, I think. Is that correctly?
Yeah.
So,
and I can't name a single facility that has a spare cracking tower in their warehouse.
In the West.
Anywhere.
How do we know that they haven't over the years gotten spares?
Maybe they have, but I don't know anybody else that has, and I haven't seen one.
Of course, is anybody else planning World War III?
Right. But, we haven't seen an extra distillation. I mean, first off, they're not cheap. And secondly, I don't know if you would want one just to sit there and not be pressurized or active or whatever for years. I don't know if that would be detrimental to the materials that are inside of the tower. So, I mean, I guess they could
That's a good point.
Fill it with nitrogen or something and seal it off. But, I don't know anybody that's done that. I'm not saying that it hasn't been done, but I've never heard of it, and I've never seen it.
I think in this case, I think we can look at one thing. I think we can look at the Russian gas extraction, and we can take an example of whether or not these systems have broken down and what they're dealing with there. The gas turbines, for example, the ones that they had by Siemens and Rolls-Royce specifically, that were made by Western engineers, and we sent in the people to do the maintenance and things on them. They didn't have any spares for those. And you would have thought that they would have spares for those, and they're not. They've had to rely on the Chinese to make up for that. And it's the same thing here, I think.
Oh, and same thing in their airline industry too.
Yeah,
all those civilian jetliners, they've had to get the parts from China.
Yes, and you just had a Russian aircraft from Aeroflot. You have your choice in airlines, right? That's got to be the worst record for aviation disasters, I think, in existence. But they made an emergency landing. I think it was yesterday, because one of their engines went out, and I think the other one caught fire as they were trying to get on an emergency landing. But the distillation units, just like with the distillation units, the gas turbines with the fans, the fins that are on the fans on the inside of the gas turbines, these have to be grown too. And it takes up to 3 years in some cases to grow those blades too, because of the high temperatures that they have to operate at. So it takes about 3 to 5 years as a waiting time to be on a list to get those. So if the Chinese can't grow those, then I don't think the Chinese can grow the metals that go inside of a cracking tower either. I think they're relying on us too for that. That's what I think.
It sounds reasonable. That sounds reasonable. And in that case, and how confident are you that it's 65% of their oil refining is out?
I'm very confident.
Yeah, we were 50. I think we were just over 50, or almost 53 last week, and then Perm got hit 2 days ago.
And Perm is one of the top 10.
Yes, Perm processes 8.5 million tons a year for oil, or 8.5 million barrels or something. No, 8.5 million tons. I'm sorry, 8.5 million tons. And they specifically hit the cracking tower, the distillation unit. Nothing else. No tank farms.
I saw the video of it. Yeah, I saw the video of it hit. Yes.
So there's your 65.
So, and Putin seems giddy. I saw him the other day in a speech, and he was giggling practically about saying that they were going to win the war. It was like he was on some kind of drugs. I mean, did you see that, Lee?
No, I didn't see that, but I did see where he has went to all of the different oligarchs and taken over their property and is giving them pennies on the dollar for
Re-Sovietization. Yeah.
Right. He has
those generous contributions.
Right. He has stolen billions of dollars.
Well, you got to remember that all those oligarchs, that stuff was stolen and given to them by the KGB to begin with.
That's right.
Right.
They all had to sign contracts with the KGB.
A lot of oligarchs have already started fleeing Russia and taking their fortune with them.
Well, that's why they created the lists of oligarchs to confiscate their stuff if they did flee. That was one of the ways that Bill Broder was so helpful in stopping capital flight from Russia. And very few of those oligarchs can actually get away, I think.
Yeah, a couple of things on that. We'll get to this plays an important part in what we're seeing economically in Russia. But before we get to that, I want to talk about. Well, no, let's just do that first, and then I want to talk about Telegram. But because that was a big development this morning, as I was telling you. But the oligarchs' money being taken, you have that. Now you have the Russian Duma, the Russian State Duma, has ordered the state-owned banks to take care of the national debt. So they've laid that now on the banks. So now you've got the banks that are going to say, okay, well, it's going to be carte blanche on taking deposits, right? They're going to seize people's deposits at that point because they're going to need to cover the loss, right?
Or they'll follow China's precedent, and your money will be in the bank theoretically, but you won't be able to get it out.
You can't do that now in a lot of cases. If you're,
that's how it works in China. Yeah. You have to petition the government and the police and the bank to get your money out to buy something.
At least you can petition something in China. In Russia, you can't do that. You walk into a bank and you say, "I want to withdraw X amount of money out of my account." The bank's going to look at you, and I've seen Russians putting up videos and stuff of this, saying this. If you want this amount of money, you're going to have to prove to us where this came from.
You may see the same thing. Yeah, you may see the same thing here.
Oh, and it's worse than that.
Really?
Because now
I think you will. Yeah.
It's worse than that because now they're actually saying, well, we're not going to give you that money for that because we think that's a fraudulent organization, or we don't think that's a good use of your money. So they're actually telling them that they won't give them their money. Even if they do prove where it came from, they still won't give it to them because it's they're protecting the customers from fraud, is what the Russians are saying now. That's the latest.
Well, we're headed for a financial crisis. In about 5 weeks, you're going to see it start to heat up because the oil is draining out of the world because of this closing of the Strait of Hormuz, and it's like a slow leaking of a balloon. And Trump has had all these months to deploy serious forces to take down Iran, but he prefers to waste bombs, very expensive bombs, on bunkers that probably cost less than the bombs. And I don't know, Lee, you can tell us or not, but the Iranians will repair it and build new bunkers in another 3 months, and all that bombing, it'll be like we didn't do it.
It won't be 3 months. They're repairing some of this stuff in 10 days.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the most effective use of air power is when you have ground forces in terms of military operations, because your ground forces are right there to exploit the air attacks and to be protected by air attacks against forces that emerge to counterattack. So it's a very powerful combination, air and ground. But air by itself, it's not a powerful combination. It's a freaking waste of money, and it's not going to accomplish anything. And the other side, they got the drones. See, we're vulnerable because a tanker can be hit, and that's it for the tanker. But all this stuff in Iran and these mountains and these crags and these caves, it's like, good luck. There's more caves, crevices, bunkers, mountains, fortresses underground than we have ordnance to bomb them. I'm sorry. They've been decades.
I don't think that's the case. I think our we may not have a shitload of smart munitions, but we have the ability to make dumb bombs into smart bombs by clipping a $10,000 or a $15,000 guidance system on them. We can bomb them into eternity. We have thousands and thousands of acres of munitions in bunkers. I mean,
I think they have thousands of bunkers.
Well, they do. But I'm saying we have thousands of
bunkers. And the thing is I don't think each bomb destroys a bunker. I think you have to use several bombs, maybe 10, 20 to actually destroy a bunker. In World War II, the Germans attacked Brest-Litovsk, and it was fortified. They had heavy bunkers in Brest-Litovsk. And when you read the history of the German invasion of the Soviet Union, they couldn't take this place. And so they brought their heaviest bombers, they dropped their heaviest bombs, and then they went in and the bunkers were not destroyed.
Well, yeah, but
so the idea that one for one, bomb for... No, I'm afraid that this is not what people think. And if you can repair something in 10 days, you better get ground forces there to exploit it within 10 days or you're back to square one.
Right, but,
so,
but you
well, if we were here in Vietnam, we dropped more tonnage of ordnance in Vietnam than all the ordnance we dropped in World War II, including the 2 atomic bombs, we dropped on. And by the way, we dropped the equivalent of 600 atomic bombs on Germany in terms of nuclear ordnance. 600 Hiroshima bombs on Germany is what we dropped on them in conventional ordnance. And we dropped more than that, much more than that, on North Vietnam and the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the Viet Cong. And we didn't destroy them or defeat them. Why? Because we didn't send troops to Hanoi to exploit the bombing and to go in. This same thing applies here. We didn't have the nerve to go to Hanoi, and we don't have the nerve to go to Tehran, even though the people are begging us to come. We expect them to do it without us putting troops on the ground. That's not going to happen.
Well, I agree with that, but you can't compare the bombing campaigns of World War II with the bombing campaigns that we carry out today. Back then, we would have...
No, because we have much less tonnage of bombs.
Well, no, correct, but we
have a fraction of the tonnage of bombs.
But we have more accurate bombs.
The difference is that we are more precise on the target.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We're more precise on target.
The thing is the same. The result is the same. In World War II, we took 100 bombs to what we would do with one bomb. But it's still, if we didn't come in with troops, the bombing isn't going to matter.
Right. Well, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. Right. But we have the ability to take dumb bombs and make them smart bombs. And if you put 2 or 3 500-pounders on the entrance of an underground facility, you're not going into that facility anytime soon.
And you're not calculating how many facilities are fake.
Right. Well, we can determine what's fake. We can determine what's fake and what's not by the persistent surveillance we have over the country to be able to see if they frequent that bunker.
I'm sorry, but we hit a girls' school that used to be a naval headquarters and killed a bunch of schoolgirls. Because we didn't know that wasn't an ongoing... The idea that our intelligence really knows what they're hitting, I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
Well, I'm still trying to figure out how you have a girls' school in the middle of a Iranian military government complex.
Because they left that... They didn't... They weren't using... The Navy wasn't using it anymore. See,
well, there was an attack.
That our bureaucracy is perfect and that we know everything. And
okay,
do it all right is not true.
Okay, so we've been bombing Iran for what, 6 months?
Well, we just bombed them in March. We stopped bombing them in the first week in April.
No, but I'm saying we started 6 months ago, and we've dropped thousands of bombs. We hit one school.
And what I'm saying is that we probably hit a lot of things that also were not targets, not schools, but maybe things that were just empty and didn't have any meaningful target. That's what I'm saying.
We
precision hit them, but there wasn't anything there.
Can I throw something in here?
Sure.
The fact is that regardless, and I take both of your points into consideration, But I think one of the other aspects that needs to be considered here, to Jeff's point, is even though we have the precision, and Lee, you've talked about this before, we're playing whack-a-mole.
Correct.
With all of this, and we're not actually dealing with what needs to be dealt with. These little small boats and stuff that should have been dealt with on day one, right? That should have been taken care of. But instead, it's not being dealt with in a blanket kind of response. It's just, oh well, we've got that over there, we're going to knock that out, or we've got that over there, we're going to knock that out. We've got that over there, and we're going to knock that out. But by the time you've done that, as I said, some of these things, some of these underground facilities are being rebuilt in 10 days. By the time you've done that, everything that you started with, all of it's been negated. So you have to start all over again.
What's interesting is you look at the Falklands War as a good object lesson, because you have these excellent, it's the first time we're using some of this precision ordnance. The Argentinians, for example, and the Argentinians had an excellent air force with tremendous pilots with really great abilities. The British fleet comes in, 30-something warships and the Queen Elizabeth II, and and here they're hitting, I think 27, 28 British warships got direct strikes from bombs from the Argentinian Air Force, but only sunk two, three, four ships. Why didn't they all sink? And these are beautiful strikes, right?
Right,
because,
but ships
because the bombs were calibrated for cruisers and battleships. The bombs the Argentinians were using when they hit the outer skin of a UK destroyer or one of the UK frigates or something, it would just go right through the hull and bounce around inside of the ship and not explode, not detonate, because it was that bomb needed to strike something really hard to get it to detonate. And so there was why the British survived what should have destroyed their fleet. The Argentinians, if the Argentinians had understood, and the thing is that this simple mistake is that you make a bomb and you don't realize it's not even, you hitting right on the target, it's not destroying the target, and you don't understand why. This is an example of, in modern warfare, how complicated it gets.
Well, they didn't have the problem with the Super Étendards and the Exocet missiles, everything that
they did, because they didn't blow up when they hit the Dorsetshire. The Dorsetshire caught fire and sank because it was made out of aluminum, and the unspent fuel from the Exocet actually set the ship on fire. That's why the Dorsetshire sunk. But it wasn't, the warhead on the Exocet didn't detonate. It went right through it because it wasn't solid enough body. If it had hit a cruiser or something heavier or a battleship or a carrier, it would have detonated. But it didn't.
Well, I thought an Exocet. Well, they fired multiple Exocets.
They only sunk one ship with Exocets.
Just a thing to note here. Rajan Oil Refinery it's just been announced that they will shut down all processing as of today because of the strikes that happened late last night. That's 13 million tons of oil annually, and that's now offline.
And
so
Spain is currently being invaded by Morocco.
Yes, I saw that.
120,000 people an hour is what's being reported.
120,000 an hour?
Yes.
I heard it was only 5,000.
No, 120,000 an hour is the latest report.
Okay.
They are pouring across the border.
You got to be kidding me.
Nope.
Into that little enclave right there. I mean, I'm seeing video of it, but I didn't realize that it was a continuous flow. I thought it was just one group of people.
I think it was 120,000 an hour. Whoever posted that, post that again. Make sure I'm correct. 120,000 an hour is what I believe. I think it was Mark that posted it.
Okay.
I will correct myself.
Spain is sending soldiers. Excuse me. It's 12,000 an hour, not 120,000 an hour.
Yeah.
12,000 an hour.
I just want to correct myself. The Sheffield was the ship that they sunk, and it was. And they did sink one other ship, a merchant ship with an Exocet, because it was because of its cargo. But the missiles went through the ship, and the ship sank because of fire. Oh, good grief!
That camera of yours.
That camera,
I love your camera.
Yeah, it's
When
terrible.
you get serious, it does the close-ups. It's automatic. It's
It
awesome.
does.
I
Yeah.
use my hand.
It knows. It knows that you're going to get serious, so
Yeah.
it just zooms right in. Yeah.
Yeah, it does that annoying thing.
You know
Okay,
what?
so
You see-
it's
you see
over
how
100
efficient AI is.
It's over 100,000 have already crossed. They're crossing at 12,000 an hour, and there's no end in sight.
They're
So-
going into Spanish Sahara. Is that where they're going?
No, they're going. So you've got Morocco, and then on the Moroccan side, you have that little like Spanish enclave that they've got
It's
right
called
there.
Spanish Morocco.
Is that what it is? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the official name for
I
it.
think
but
so.
they're-
At least, yeah.
They are
Spanish
just.
Morocco.
I saw it this afternoon. There were thousands of people just slamming into the border.
Yeah, the border's open
just-
and it's wide
just
open. They're just pouring
massive.
across.
So
Yep.
and the tourists were there in their resorts, just looking at it, videoing it, just in horror.
All
And
of
these-
them are men.
You know, I made
Half
I-
of them
I
don't
made a
have shirts
point-
on.
Yeah, I made a point.
Nobody over
when I was
30.
looking at. Yeah, when I made a point when I was looking at that this afternoon, clearly that's orchestrated. These are not starving people. If you look at this, these are not destitute people. Some of them are overweight. They have clean clothes. I'm sorry, and I'm talking
smartphones.
white shirts. Yeah, and phones. I'm talking clean white shirts. If you're destitute and you're starving and you're coming through, if you're coming through Africa, you're not going to have a clean white shirt. Who's paying them? Who's funding that? Who's feeding them? Who's doing their laundry? Who's paying for those smartphones? Who's paying for the shoes?
Yeah, I guess Spanish Morocco went over to Morocco some years ago. So you're talking about a little strip of Spain below Gibraltar on the strait.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
How many square miles is that? It can't be much.
It's not much. It's not much. It's just this tiny little sliver
Well,
down there.
why are they doing this? Why are people
We
going
don't
there?
know. We don't know.
Is there something going on in Morocco?
My guess is that you've got there's nothing going on in Morocco. My guess is these are from other parts of Africa. They're just flowing right through. My guess is the Russians have been down there meddling around in Mali and a few other places.
Oh yeah, all over Africa, and there's the
Yeah,
Chinese too.
and there is civil conflict after civil conflict after civil conflict in these countries that are going on.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming that they're the ones that are.
people are part of that too.
Yes, I'm assuming that they're the ones that are organizing this flow of people north. I'm assuming that's where it's coming from, because now let's go back and look. So when we condemned what was going on in Crimea in 2014, what did Russia do? They facilitated that movement of migrants across into Europe, did they not?
Yes, they did. I did
Yeah.
a paper on that with
So
the
here we are
European
again.
lady.
Here we are
they,
again.
They organized that movement of people out of
Yeah,
Syria
I think this
and
is
other
the same
places.
thing. I think this is the same thing.
And I
That's
suspect the same
yeah.
thing is about the people crossing our border in the Biden administration.
Absolutely.
It was
Yeah,
organized
absolutely.
by
It was absolutely and
mafias,
funded by
organized
us.
crime groups.
We had organizations in Mexico and in other countries that were actually paying the bus drivers to bring the people to the border. They were providing them with food, water, everything they
Gosh,
needed,
yeah.
and then as soon as they came across the border, the agencies that were supporting them on the south side of the border picked them up on the north side of the border. There was a Catholic church, there was Catholic ministries, there was all kinds of religious organizations and other organizations that were backing all of this and being funded to do it. It was absolutely insane what was going on. And somebody just said that the enclave is 60 square miles.
Well, if you got 12,000 an hour coming across there, that's going to get taken up pretty quickly. I saw that they've already gone into some of the shopping areas, and they're beating up civilians, and people coming out of shops and restaurants and cafes and stuff. Spanish citizens.
Yeah, it just says that somebody just said, Diesel just said that per reports 2 to 3 months ago, Spain legalized 500,000 migrants, which has led to the current crisis.
Yeah, I'm watching videos of just
Oh yeah, I am
thousands
too.
of people.
Yep.
Thousands of people. That's crazy. Thoughts, Jeff?
Yeah, well, it's a very small piece of land, so they can't really. It's not easy for them to get to metropolitan Spain, the main Spanish mainland from there, is it? I mean,
If well, here's the thing: you've got who's the current leader of Spain? It's Pedro Sanchez. Yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very,
He's
very
he's
left
a
wing.
very far left to the left.
Yes,
Yeah.
very left wing. So what you're going to have now is you're going to have Pedro Sanchez. In my guess, you're going to have him because of what he's just done with 500,000. He's going to come out, or his government rather is going to come out, and he's going to say, we're going to have to welcome these people in with open arms, and we're going to be sending boats across for them to get there to the mainland. And I think that's what you're going to see. That's my guess.
Well, he's got an election coming up in a year from next month.
Yeah.
So
Why
he
can't
will
he get
be out? He will be thrown out of office in that event.
Yeah, but that's okay as long as the damage gets done. What does he care?
Well, it's like with Britain, you know, I do think that a civil war, Spain is one of those countries that is vulnerable to civil war, just like Great Britain is. I think of all the countries in Western Europe, those two are the most vulnerable to civil war. And if they do that,
Yeah.
they're going to move Spain considerably closer to civil war.
We've been kind of theorizing. You know, we were talking the Russian LNG because of the new sanctions, right? The Russian LNG into Europe stops on January 1 coming up, right, in 2027. So whatever LNG is not into Europe on a ship by December 31st, 2026, it ain't getting in, right? It's just not going to happen. So you've got, and we were looking at where that's going. That's going to the Netherlands. It's going to France. It's going to Belgium. And it's going to Spain, right? These countries. So if you don't have gas, the LNG that's supplying Western Europe, you can sandwich what's in the middle, right? So you're going to create conflict on one end. This is, instead of Russia actually, per their military doctrines, instead of them parachuting into the deep rear, why not just have a whole bunch of migrants that you control in groups? Why don't you have them do it?
Well, you can send agents in and terrorists in with these large groups of civilians.
There you go.
And then the government has the burden of taking care of people who are indigent, who don't have jobs, who may not even have the language you need. And you're burdening the society that you're bringing them in. But this is the kind of thing they're doing. We know that Spain has been a center of attention for Russia. Because Russia wants to ignite a second Spanish Civil War. Actually, Spain has had more civil wars than that. But it's I think the real issue is you have separatist movements in Spain already, and you combine that with this problem, and you have an economic problem, which we're headed for in several weeks when countries start running out, their oil reserves start running out, and you've got an economic or financial collapse that begins, and then you have the conditions for unrest, which of course leads to revolution or civil war in many cases. So, you look at the French Revolution that happened during a time when temperatures were getting colder, like they are now. We're headed for a grand solar minimum. We're in one. It hasn't cooled off yet. We've been living off the residual heat in the oceans. And and it's very funny. The French Revolution kicked off in the middle of one of those. And so did the Napoleonic Wars. And you can get another cycle of these things. And, no, we don't really fully understand in the second millennium BC what collapsed civilization and brought the sea peoples out and caused every major empire to collapse except Egypt just barely survived. It was probably a grand solar minimum that caused that. And you have major volcanic eruptions during these periods, as Lee will chime in.
Earthquakes, fires.
Yeah. Have we heard from Heinrich Svensmark at all?
No.
He got fired.
Well, he got...
Yes, he did. After we had approached him to come on the show.
Yeah.
He hadn't come on yet, and he was fired.
Agreed.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
He agreed. And it's interesting that 2 weeks after he said he agreed, he told me, he says, yep. He says, I'll come on as soon as I get back from holiday. And he got fired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not funny. I think it's sad.
It's funny. It's odd that would happen.
It's the timing just
Something
seems
funny about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about Telegram really quickly. Okay, so the Telegram founder, the FSB issued a warrant for his arrest yesterday for aiding and abetting terrorism. The reason being is that the FSB says that this is because the Ukrainian military is using Telegram to recruit people and to contact people inside of Russia that will allow them to hit precision targets inside of Russia. As of today, the Russian State Duma has pushed through legislation, and it passed, to cause Telegram to become a platform for extremism and terrorism. You've got to think that there are, at any given time, about 100 million Russians. Not just people in Russia, but 100 million Russian-speaking people use Telegram. That's like the Russian version of WhatsApp. They use this, and if that is declared that by the state, anyone caught using it at this point can be considered aiding and abetting terrorism. You see how this works?
Oh yeah, they have to control public opinion. When you're going to war, you have to make sure that you control public opinion. You have to be able to mold it. Otherwise, you can't sustain the war.
Yeah, I don't think that they've been able to, as in the Russian security services, this is why they came out with Max. I don't think that they've been able to fully stomp down on Telegram the way they wanted to. It's been curtailed slowly in different parts over the course of the last year or so. They got rid of voice and video calls on Telegram in Russia. You can't do that anymore. Anyone outside, even calling in, you can't do that. The phone systems, you and I were looking into whether or not you could even get a call into Russia. Mm-hmm. And even though it's still possible, it's not likely in most cases. And of course, if you do get through, then it's going to be listened to the whole time while you're on the phone. But no, I think that they found that Max was not successful, because Max was working fine. There's no issues with it if you put it on your device in Russia, but the whole thing is just full of like malware and spyware by the security services, by the FSB. They're watching and listening to everything you do. The
definition of what works in Russia is what keeps the public opinion with the security services in the state. And if public opinion is slipping, they're going to cast about for a way to get back control of the narrative and to control public opinion. And they control their TV, they control their radio now, since Echo Moscow was pushed off the air. They basically got 100% narrative, and they're trying to get control of this internet, where Russians can still reach. I think if they got VPN, they can still get things from outside Russia to listen to that are Russian language. And that's a problem, because if they can get information in their own language outside of the country, it's really bad for Russia. And because then you lose control of your population, because they're not necessarily believing your narrative. And as the pressure mounts, what is the pressure? The pressure is we can't get enough gasoline. The quality of the food is going down. Our sons are going off and being killed in this war. And that creates a lot of negativity. And they have to counter that negativity. If they're not able to counter that negativity, the government's going to be forced to give up the war or fall, because people will come out in the streets, and even the security services and the army will turn their guns on the government, which is what happened to Russia in 1917 in the February Revolution.
And you have people
not the Bolshevik Revolution, by the way, the February Revolution.
You have people in the Duma right now saying that they're facing another 1917 style situation. Yeah. Because of the economics and propaganda and things like that.
And the Tsar had to abdicate in early 1917. Later, the Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government, which was what it was established in the first revolution. So Russia had two revolutions in 1 year. By the way, they didn't get out of World War I. They stayed in the war after the first revolution. Of course, it cost the government, because what happened was a revolution, another revolution led by the Bolsheviks, really a coup happened. But this is what happened in 1905 when they lost the Russo-Japanese War. They had a revolution. They put it down. The government won that, put down that revolution. But this is what happens in an autocratic government. You think because people can't vote. Well, they can vote by rioting. They can vote by turning their guns. Whole regiments can vote by turning their guns on the government. So you got to realize how dangerous it is becoming for this Russian government.
And I think they know it.
Yeah,
You know,
I think they do. That's why they're trying to control the internet. Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of people are taking rides out of windows and being found on their balconies, hanging there.
Well, when they started this anti-American, NATO's at fault for everything narrative, it was April of 2014, after the Euromaidan revolution. And the head of one of their biggest television media networks, I forget his name, he had this long conversation with Putin about how they were going to do this really Cold War, anti-American, anti-NATO hate radio, hate television, and he shot himself. I believe it was he shot himself after that, because he either they shot him and made it look like a suicide because he wasn't going to go along with it, or he didn't want to do it and he killed himself. So it was not easy to get Russians to go along with this whole train they've been on since the Euromaidan revolution. And it is a civil war within the Soviet structures, because Soviet structures controlled Ukraine before that revolution. That revolution overthrew those Soviet structures. And now, of course, what you describe, Johnny, is the taking back of all these so-called private companies owned by so-called billionaires, oligarchs. They're taking them back to the state. This is Sovietism. This is re-Sovietization, which they openly acknowledged re-Sovietization. I think it was, 2 years ago, November? Or was it 3 years ago, November?
We were seeing it. We were seeing it before that with the renaming of things. You know, you've got the Stalingrad airport coming back, and it's going to be the city next any day now. St. Petersburg will probably go back to Leningrad at some point.
A big statue of Stalin in the metro.
Yep.
Yeah, and then when they came into Ukraine, they had Soviet flags on their tanks.
Yes, and we're putting up statues of Leningrad in the oblast that they were taking. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, well, they still call it it's still the Leningrad oblast, where St. Petersburg is.
Well, you've also got you've got members of the State Duma calling for the return of Lenin rooms in schools.
Yeah.
For children. Yeah. And you've got Putin, who just made the announcement that it was been about a month ago now, that the Academy for the FSB will now go back to the name for it'll be called the Felix Dzerzhinsky School of Higher Learning.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what we also are going to see, and we already are seeing the beginnings of it, is an acknowledgement that they are reconstituting the Soviet Union. At some point, they're going to openly start to say that. And Zelensky, in his interview with Laura Loomer, underscored this. The reason they're attacking Ukraine is they're putting the Soviet Union back together again. And that's why they're with communist China. It's a communist alliance. He's saying it very, very, I think it's part of Zelensky's conversion to being a politician, is I think he was one of these people who understood it, because he was a movie star in Russia as well as Ukraine, and he knew a lot of people in the upper structures, and I think he came to see it, that's what it was, and I think that's what it is. That's very clear-sighted of him, and this is the insight we need in Washington, as well as Berlin and London and Paris. They need to all be publicly acknowledging that we're dealing with this revival of the Soviet Union, aligned with China. We're dealing with a new Soviet bloc or communist bloc or socialist camp, as they used to call it. And that puts all these domestic traitors of ours in a certain perspective. Because the one thing we never did in the Cold War was we never declared war. In the Vietnam War, in the Korean War, we didn't declare war. So all these people like Jane Fonda were technically not traitors. Our boys were fighting communist soldiers and dying, and they were taking a pro-communist stance and being for the Viet Cong, for example, and the North Vietnamese like Jane Fonda, but we couldn't arrest them and put them in jail because we weren't officially at war. This is what we need to do in the future. It doesn't, if you're at war with somebody, it doesn't mean you have to nuke them or use nukes, but what it does mean is you can arrest the traitors in this country who want the enemy to win, right?
And there are plenty of those.
There are
plenty of those. And they talk into things like this too. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh,
Yeah.
they do.
Yes,
and
they do.
it's very confusing here on our side. People are very confused.
is.
They don't know who their enemy or their friend is. A lot of people are siding with America's enemies without realizing it.
I had someone on the phone earlier today, someone that I've known for decades, and believes every bit of the Russian narrative on it. And I could not, I just cannot believe. And this person has Ukrainian neighbors in America, and I'm like, you can't be serious. You cannot be serious.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is. That's really how bad it is.
Yeah, you got to
can we
be.
just-
The number one thing is to be oriented, to have the population oriented to
Yeah.
who their enemy is,
Yeah.
and to understand the direness of the situation. We haven't done that in this country. We're not led by grown-ups, to put it simply.
We're amusing ourselves to death.
Yeah. We're led by a president salesman who cares more about the appearance of things than the actual end product.
Well, it's like Mamdani. He said he was asked his opinion about Mayor Mamdani, who's clearly a communist, and he says, "Well, what's your opinion of Mayor Mamdani?" He says, "Well, he looks good."
Yeah, there it is. There's Trump.
It's-
Yeah, it's an advertising thing. It's like, does he look good on an advertising brochure? Does he look presentable?
Is he from
know?
Central Casting? That's
is he
Trump's
I mean,
line.
Yeah,
this is
well,
a reality TV star ad man in the hotel business. So I'm sorry, but it's just, he's not adequate. And although I would vote for him again over,
Would too.
over what's her name? Yeah.
What's her
She'll
face?
run again. Or
Kamala.
AOC. Even AOC. I'd vote for Trump over an AOC.
Oh,
any day
of course.
the week. My goodness.
She's a communist too. That whole
Absolutely.
DFA thing, they're freaking Stalinists. So AOC, but you see, it's going to be AOC. I predict, and it's never make predictions, but I, looking at the electoral situation now, presently, it looks like she's going to be the candidate. They want a woman, and they want a socialist, and they want a minority, and she fulfills
That she fits all of it.
job
And if-
requirements, right?
If you
Yeah.
notice,
Claiming
her-
she's
her-
black when she's Indian.
Yeah. Well, I,
Wasn't
I,
she
I
Puerto
like,
Rican? I thought
No.
she was
She's like
Puerto Rican.
she's Latino of some kind.
No,
or
no,
something,
she's
isn't
in, she's
Is
I
she
thought she
Indian?
was from India.
No,
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 that's
no,
Kamala.
no,
You're
She's-
thinking Kamala
she's
Harris.
That's what we're talking about,
Puerto
Kamala
Rican
Harris. Who are you talking about?
Oh, we were talking about AOC.
Oh, we're talking about AOC.
I'm sorry.
AOC's not Indian.
Yeah, no, AOC is,
Kamala
she's not
Harris
Indian. I thought you were talking about Kamala.
is black and Indian. She's both
Yeah.
black, white, and Indian.
But
Yeah.
to the AOC point, you can see where her cadence and her voice tempo is changing.
She's
and,
being
and the way
trained
that
and groomed.
she's being coached. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. You can see it.
Yeah, no, and the thing is that she's not a genius, but she's not an idiot. She's not the idiot people think. And it's always a tremendous advantage to be underestimated. And I got to warn people, don't underestimate her.
I think, and that's what, and we'll end on this point because we're gonna have to do Q&A. But you said that you watched an interview recently, and unfortunately I'm not able to see it. I'm gonna have to try the VPN thing, see if I can get around it, with Viktor Suvorov, and he made the point of almost of what you just said is
Yes.
if it goes wrong in Russia, if everything, because he says that the whole leadership in there is degenerated so much, and I believe him. I absolutely believe him.
Yeah, I think he's
And
right. He's a very sharp observer. Yes.
Yeah, and he made the point, per what you were talking about. He made the point that if there is a shakeup, if there is a change, it's going to be something like what you just described. It's going to be someone that we think is some buffoon, some idiot that we've never heard of. Kind of
He
like
uses
what people
the
thought of-
example of Khrushchev being the
Khrushchev,
ultimate
yeah.
guy that replaced
Yeah.
Stalin. And Khrushchev was the clown that Stalin emptied his pipe on his head and made him dance. Dance, Nicky, dance. He was the clown. He was the butt of the jokes. But he ended up being the guy in charge.
Yes.
Malenkov and Beria. Beria ended up being shot. Malenkov ended up being replaced. Molotov ended up in some post in Siberia or Mongolia, wherever they sent him. So he basically, all these big name Soviet leaders who were considered brainy and they were considered, in better position, it was Khrushchev that won out. And so what Suvorov is saying is it's not somebody you expect that's going to emerge. And I think that's very true. It's someone who's underestimated. And of course, is someone who's, read Khrushchev's books and speeches and followed his career. Khrushchev was really smart. Even though he was a bumpkin and he didn't learn to read till he was like 16 or 17 years old, he was no dummy. And if you survive Stalin and you did what you did, and you emerged. You're not stupid, right? So whatever people thought of him, and of course a lot of people made fun of him, he was very bright. And that's the thing, is if you get underestimated, and I think not that that Nikita Khrushchev was a genius or that AOC is a genius. I think she's much brighter than people give her credit for. And that's the problem of being underestimated. Same thing with Trump. Everybody thought he's such a joke. He's such a, whatever, but he had the instinct, he had the drive, and he had the understanding of how to move large crowds of people. And he did it. Even though, in our system, the only qualification to being president, aside from those in the Constitution, you have to be 35 years of age or older, and you have to be a citizen, natural born citizen. The only qualification is that you can get votes, that you can win people over to vote for you. Mm-hmm. And he was able to do that in large numbers, despite having a disagreeable temperament and having high negatives. But what they realized was that Hillary Clinton had higher negatives, really. And so now you're getting into J.D. Vance, probably going to be the candidate, right? Versus AOC. The polls show her crushing him. Why?
Yeah.
Right?
I would much rather see, just if I had to choose, I would much rather see a Marco Rubio than a J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
I would much rather see that. Marco Rubio has gone beyond whatever expectations I could have had for the guy in this administration. Mm-hmm. He's completely impressed me and blown me away with the way now I know that I was criticizing his report from the State Department saying that Cuba is the capital of 21st century communism. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it's very strange. See, Rubio, I don't totally trust him because I know he knows better. Because at the beginning of his book, which I read several months ago, at the beginning of his book, he says something that I've been trying to say. He says, communism, we didn't win the Cold War. Communism survived the Cold War. But of course, he doesn't explicitly identify it with Moscow and with the revival of the socialist camp globally. So he's almost there. He's as close to being there as I would hope to be, but he's not there yet. And the thing is that politically, he is not going to beat Vance, I don't think. But we'll see. We'll see. And there's probably, again, some sleeper somewhere. I would like the governor of Florida, but he's got no charisma, presidential charisma. He doesn't have it. You see him up on stage with these other people, it's like, oh, there's something that it just doesn't come off. And there has to be that aura, right? Somebody needs to teach him how to walk and talk and move differently. Obama was actually trained by a Shakespearean actor how to have these mannerisms, how to seem presidential. And you really do have that, because the American people, there's two things in American presidential politics. Talk like Lincoln, talk like Abraham Lincoln, look like George Washington, right?
Well, they said that symmetry of facial features is one of the things that has appealed to people. And of all the presidents, the most perfect balanced face of symmetry is Bill Clinton. Of all of the presidents, he had the most symmetric face of any president, and they think part of it was plastic surgery. But it was Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton had plastic surgery before he ran for president in '92.
From what they said, I don't know if he had plastic surgery. What I'm saying is he had plastic surgeons use Bill Clinton's face as an example of perfect symmetry. Mm-hmm. And that people look for perfect symmetry, and Bill Clinton, of all of the presidents and people, Bill Clinton has almost perfect symmetry on his face. And the plastic surgeon I was talking to said they don't know if Bill had plastic surgery, but it was hard to believe that he hadn't, to have that perfect of symmetry. Because at one time I was going to have the end of my nose changed.
Yeah, that is true. People gravitate towards that, towards perfect. Yeah, there's been studies on that. Yeah.
Can we do Q&A, gentlemen?
Yes, we need to do Q&A. So questions only in the chat from here on out, folks. So for those of you that had questions, put them in the chat now. And there was something up here that I wanted to read. I need to go by. Mark is saying that Israel has canceled their weekly cabinet meeting set for Sunday. Where's that dun 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 button that I need? Now that's not a common event. Thoughts,
Well,
gentlemen?
you have. I'll just mention that there's this story, and you can correct me, but that the Iranians are moving centrifuges into Pickaxe Mountain, and there's been this rumor that there's a contemplated nuclear strike to take out Pickaxe Mountain by the Americans and/or the Israelis. And of course, there's been, as you pointed out, the Russian doomsday plane was flown into Iran, which suggests the Russians helping the Iranians if they need to make a nuclear counterstrike. So is that plane still in Iran, Ali?
Not at this time that I know of.
They pulled it back?
Yeah, I can't say that it's still there. I didn't see it leave, but I don't think it's still there.
Right. So, I mean, this is, and this would be a very serious mistake, I think, to use a nuke at Pickaxe Mountain, although I can see why it would be tempting, because it would open the door for Russia using nukes in Ukraine, and also Iran using nukes against our forces in the Middle East. And did we mention in the broadcast that a Saudi oil refinery was attacked by Iranian drones? Did we mention that?
Well, there's been a lot of stuff attacked by Iranian drones.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Yeah, it's getting worse.
An American LNG tanker was hit as well by the Iranians by drones. That's why we're hitting them right now.
Yeah, this is really bad because the Middle East and in Saudi Arabia, it's not just crude oil that comes out of there. They refine a lot of things.
And
a
we
lot
get
of the
fertilizer
refining
out of there
capacity.
too.
Yes, and so this is really we're getting into the second half of summer here, where a lot of regions they'll plant a second crop, right? And,
well, not only that, you're going to have to you're going to need that as a farmer. You're going to need the fertilizer.
We need the fertilizer.
You're going to need the fertilizer for the spring, for the planting season, the next season. If you don't have that coming to you, then you're going to be in some serious trouble.
Well, I'm told the prices are so high that farmers in states, I've talked to people in Michigan and Idaho, are not planting because they're deciding not to because the price of the fertilizer is too high.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course diesel. You were talking to your farmer friend about diesel, and it went up.
I mean, the amount of diesel he uses, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
3,000 gallons of diesel to operate a farm for 1 year.
Yeah. All right. Gary Kasparov said today that Putin needs a quick victory and mentioned Poland and the Baltics. What do you see as Russia's most likely quick win option?
I'm sorry, you talking to me or who?
Oh, that's a question for all of us.
Oh, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
Gary Kasparov said today that Putin needs a quick victory and mentioned Poland and the Baltics. What do you see as Russia's most likely quick win option?
The Baltics.
I would say the Baltics. I would say they would cut Slovakia, and put the Baltic states under siege, and then Article 5 would be invoked. That puts Russia in the driver's seat against NATO. That's my guess. That would be a quick win.
They could also attack Estonia, which could be overrun quicker and more easily, and then see what NATO does. I don't know. Slovakia Gap, they did the war game in the fall. I think I mentioned it to you, Johnny. They did this war game, and basically NATO officials, their reaction was just to let it happen and not confront the Russians, let them occupy what they wanted to occupy. And it sounds like a disaster, right? Because it showed a kind of weakness of will. And in the war game, I don't know what level officials were playing the parts of the main actors, but they acted like you would kind of expect them to act. They were not tough, and they were not willing to take any risks. And so you ended up with this situation. And what's bad is that the Russian forces are good at defending. They can defend. okay, everybody's kind of bad at attacking now. And so if they seal that off, they've got the Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania under siege. They can only get supplies in by sea. And then the Russians can use their drones to attack ships trying to resupply the Baltic states. And they can slowly force the Baltic states to surrender in the same way the Strait of Hormuz is closed.
Yeah, and this is actually, we've not kind of theorized about this before, but Lee, we've been watching what they've been doing in Kaliningrad. I mean, Jeff, you've been here. We've been doing that for the last year now on the fortifications, the build up, the upgrades of everything in Kaliningrad. Lee, how many drones do you think they have in Kaliningrad?
Ooh.
If you had to guess.
Yeah, I would have to guess because I haven't been tracking
because
drones.
if the Baltics are under, I know, because of it's something to consider, because if the Baltics are under siege, those drones are going to be coming out like hornets' nests out of Kaliningrad.
Yeah,
hitting ships. They will.
Yeah, I have no idea how many they have because I'm not tracking drones. I haven't even seen a large drone launcher in Kaliningrad. I have in Belarus, but I haven't in Kaliningrad.
And of course, the Ukrainians have sort of taught everybody that you can use drones to disable ships and force them to be towed back to port.
Yeah. And well, we know that the Russians are clearly preparing for drone warfare in Kaliningrad because of what they're doing to their fuel depots, what they're
all
doing
the netting, all the anti-drone
all the
netting.
netting.
Oh, absolutely.
They're clearly preparing for it. So if they're preparing for it, then that means the drones are already in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's what it looks like. And of course, the Savaki Gap could be a way of confronting NATO that scares everybody and makes them, need diapers. And they simply get what they want without a direct, nuclear or conventional war, because everybody's afraid to directly engage the Russian troops, which is understandable, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Next question here. Is Russia providing Iran with information on American bases that Iran could strike? If the U.S. were to attack Pickaxe Mountain, what might the Russians do then? Of course, they're providing the Iranians with.
I think the Chinese are more providing, aren't they, Lee?
Yeah, but I think both of them are giving everything that they can.
But you and I were talking about this the other day, Jeff, when we had just finished up our podcast on Monday, and Lee actually confirmed that. And Lee, you can actually speak on this. The Chinese satellite intelligence is far advanced beyond the Russians.
Yeah, it's better.
The Chinese, the Chinese, they've leapfrogged over the Russians, and the Russians are now getting a lot of their satellite intelligence from the Chinese.
Yeah, because the Russians can't launch that many rockets. They just haven't been successful in launching rockets.
That and the satellites they have in orbit, their optics are just garbage.
Well, and Russia has never been famous for good optics. I mean, even when the Soviet Union broke up, I got the opportunity to test all of the Soviet night vision equipment. So everything that goes on tanks, on rifles, on soldiers, even what the KGB was using. And the best pair of night vision goggles that I saw out of Russia was what were called opera glasses, which were probably about the size of 2 packs of cigarettes, but they still weren't great. That was their closest to dual vision used specifically by the KGB. But they're not experts on lenses. I've never been impressed with any optic I've ever looked through from the Russians. They had one decent pair of binoculars, but that was the best that they had to offer.
In the Cold War, in the simulations that I've seen of battles in the 1970s and 80s, the Russians have absolutely lethal power at about half the range that we had lethal power.
Yes.
And if they could close the range, they could do us real damage, but they would get hurt trying to close the range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good for about 100 to 150 meters, and we're good at get up to about 300 meters.
Yeah, that was the way the simulations played, and it was very, very. This is where their mechanized infantry was better than their tanks. Their tanks would take all the hits, and their mechanized infantry would do all the damage. Back in those days.
Question: did the U.S. really strike a school? Yes, we did. It was an accident. It was not done.
It was not on purpose. No, it was a
Yeah.
mistake.
And it was
Yeah.
right beside an IRGC facility that had already been hit by multiple rounds.
And it was a former. Got new to a school.
Well, the attack on Iran. If Trump has bungled the attack on Iran so bad, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Israel has
Maybe
a fraction of the striking power that we do, and
Yeah.
and so they're limited for any kind of sustained striking, and it's just something they can't sustain by themselves without us.
They might strike some targets in the Caspian like they've clearly done before.
Yeah.
To cut off some
Or
logistics.
kill some leaders, go after an
Yeah.
IRCG general,
Yeah.
something like that.
But or maybe cut off some land routes, logistics routes coming in from Russia or China. But apart from that, I really don't think so. I don't think it would be much more than that. Aragachi has said today that it wasn't Iran that hit the U.S. ship in Egypt, that we need to watch for Israel false flag operations trying to pass the blame. I guess I don't know. What do you guys make of the Russian cruise missile that went into Poland? I think it was an intentional provocation, as usual. That's just what the Russians are doing. They're seeing what our response time is going to be, how we're going to react to a situation, and then what the aftermath is going to be on it.
And we already
So they
know
need to
that Russia is testing their weapons against NATO weapon systems. They've got sites that are tracking our aircraft and testing different types of radars to see what radars pick up our stealth aircraft the best. They got all kinds of things they're doing right now.
Everybody before actual fighting starts wants to know how effective the weapon systems on either side are before they commit troops.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yep.
What do you guys make? No, I'm sorry. Next question. Where does Turkey fit into the coming conflicts? More Eurocentric, more Middle East? Turkey's a NATO country, but I don't trust Turkey. I'm sorry, I just don't.
That should nobody.
Yeah.
Turkey is sort of an in-between because they have all these ambitions in the Middle East where a lot of these countries were part of the Turkish Empire, and they kind of want to get back into being a great power again. And they're a significant power. They really have a conventional military that really could do things. Of course, we don't know how up they are on the new drone stuff, but they have this need to be in NATO. We need them in NATO because of Russia. They flank Russia down in the south. Obviously they don't have a border with Russia anymore, but Crimea is there in the Black Sea, and really Georgia and Azerbaijan are, this is the battleground between Russia and Turkey.
Iran. And Iran is
And
nearby.
Iran is a country that Turkey has this strange relationship with, because Turkey under Erdogan has taken these moments of being very anti-Israel, which they didn't do before, and this is a weird kind of shifting, where of course Turkey's playing to win over the Muslim masses in the Middle East. Turkey's making a play for Egypt. Turkey's making a play for influence in Iraq, and of course their big stumbling block is the Kurds. They really hate the Kurds, and America has supported the Kurds both in Iraq, and I think in Syria, and maybe if you have a situation in Iran, we're going to support the Kurds in Iran. So this is something that the Turks really don't like.
Yeah, and I believe that it's been for the last few years. I mean, you actually had Putin not too many months ago paid an official visit to Turkey, to Ankara,
Yes.
to meet with Erdogan, and he personally thanked the president of Turkey for being one of the only, or actually being the only NATO country left to allow visa-free travel for Russians.
I think Turkey was a heavy target of the KGB during the Cold War, and I think we do not know the extent to which the KGB successfully infiltrated the Turkish elite. I think we might be surprised at how many Russian agents are in the Turkish government. I think we might be surprised.
I think you also have to take into consideration the Turkish military. They still use S-400 defense systems.
Well, they just started acquiring them in recent years. So,
Yeah.
but it's because it's weird. I mean, Turkey is a weird country. If they understood their interests, they have always been an enemy of Russia.
Yeah.
Always been. I mean, you look at the Crimean War was with Britain and France siding with Turkey against Russia. World War I, Turkey was fighting Russia, and as well as the British and the French. So you've got Turkey has this past, and Erdogan is a very dangerous kind of politician because he has destroyed the Turkish Republic's central institution, which is the army's role in politics, the Turkish army's veto, and he's basically gotten control of the country away from the army.
Question, is Trump's embargo on Cuba enough to prevent the troops there from helping Russia or Iran? No. Why? Because Cuba's a communist country. Yeah, Cuba's a communist country, and their militaries are integrated with the Russian and the Chinese military. You've got Russian troops in Cuba. You've got Russian intelligence people in Cuba. Russian intelligence services set up the Cuban intelligence services, the DGI out of Cuba. You've got
as well as
troops.
Chinese.
Yeah, you've got Chinese troops
there,
and
yes.
Ministry of State Security. You've got the Chinese listening post that's there. They're listening to every single call you make in the United States from that listening post in Cuba that the Chinese have put there. Sergei Lavrov landed next to that facility and took a car and visited that facility.
And you could call Venezuela a colony of Cuba.
Yes,
with
yes.
Chinese and Russian troops, and I think there's tens of thousands of Cuban military in Venezuelan uniform.
And
in
you
Venezuela.
also have Hezbollah operating out of Caracas to this day.
Yeah,
you have
that's right.
And you still have Russian troops in Caracas. In
but
Venezuela.
it was also Cuban troops that were guarding the president of Venezuela.
Also, North Korean troops.
Yep.
You had North Korean troops. North Korean bodyguards, special forces, being the bodyguards of different. At one time, Maduro and Chavez. So
that's okay. They're cooperating with us. They're playing ball.
Yeah, they're playing ball. That is just so naive. That oil is gonna, as soon as they can break free from our control, they are going to divert that oil to China. You
better believe it. You better believe it. Next question. Why haven't they taken out Kharg Island infrastructure? I think they want to seize it, but you guys have different opinions on what they want to do with Kharg Island?
It's showboating if they attack Kharg Island because nobody's loading up at Kharg Island with oil.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the island that I would take. The islands that I would take are the ones
that's not meaningful because the Chinese are end running the oil blockade of the Middle East by going straight to Kuwait in Iraq, and they're loading up there. And both the Americans and the Iranians are letting the Chinese tankers through. So China, this doesn't mean anything to China. This closing of the Strait of Hormuz is not closed to them.
Yeah. I love this next question. Is there a reason why no mainstream media analysts take on the possibility of Russia invading the Baltics and Poland seriously? In spite of this clear buildup in Belarus and Russian mobilization, yes, because if they did, that would cause massive panic, and it would mean that we would have to mobilize and prepare for war. And no one wants to hear that.
No. Remember, we live in a capitalist country where economic optimism as a point of view is politically and culturally obligatory.
And that's the mainstream media in the United States that's not talking about it. Mainstream media in other countries are. TVP has done a show on it. BBC has done a show on it. Sky News has done a show on it. Israeli I-24 has done a show about the buildup. So there are numerous mainstream medias in other countries that have made comments about the buildup. In fact, there was a article that we tracked down that was done by, I can't remember if it was a Swedish or
it was the Dutch.
Was it the Dutch that did the report of the 120 places? And a Dutch press agency did a report about Russia putting money into 120 facilities. 100 of those are military bases. The other 20 are military airfields. And I went through the list of what they did list off, and every one of them is already on our map. So they were just confirming. I didn't find anything new from the 120 that they had listed. So mainstream media in other countries are, but not in the U.S. And you were going to say something, Johnny?
Yeah, I was going to say it's not really getting much coverage or traction where I am. You know, I'm in Germany, and it's not really discussed here.
Yeah.
So
like I said,
the German government they're taking steps. They're even taking some steps today. But you know, the government here, the defense ministry here, they're on the right track, and they're doing what they can, and they know what needs to be done. But there's no explanation that's given. If that makes any sense. So they're saying, well, they're telling the population, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this. And this is what's going to be expected of everybody, but they're not telling anybody why. If that makes sense, which it doesn't, but.
Yep. I'm with you.
Question for you, Jeff. Do you believe Yuri Felchinsky's Novorossiya theory is playing out?
That's an interesting question. There's certain things that are happening that.
Can you explain what the theory is, please? Because I don't know.
Well, he was the one who predicted that they were moving nuclear weapons into Belarus before they did so.
Yeah, and he said they were I remember when he said that. He said by them doing that, by Putin moving the nuclear weapons into Belarus, he says that means that they intend to use them.
He said they were going to use like a token use to scare everybody in Lithuania or Poland, and that they were going to make a move into that area to paralyze NATO with fear, and to flip the whole script on the Ukraine war to make Europe realize you can have a nuclear war with Russia or you can let Ukraine go. That I think that maybe summarizes his theory about how the Russians are going to play this in the future. And he's saying this back in early 2023 is when he came out with this.
So actually not that long ago.
No, it's 3.5 years ago, I think, that he first started saying it, if I remember right. And of course, he wrote this book. I read most of the book. It was very interesting. The interesting thing is he's got sources in Russia in the structures. And so I think he's being fed things from inside. I had a source years ago before all this happened. It was 2019 or 2020, and I was told that they were going to do a war, and if the war went badly, they were going to blame Putin, and he was going to be removed if the war went badly. But they were going to try this war, and I remember it was a KGB bodyguard or a FSB bodyguard of a very high level Russian official. I don't want to name which official it was because I don't want to get the bodyguard in trouble if he's still doing that job. But he basically had heard all this, and he was personally scared back in 2020. And this is right when the pandemic was breaking out. And they were wondering what was going on, and it was like, a war is coming. Well, that's 2 years before, almost to the day, before the attack on Ukraine. And it was interesting that the way he framed it, that this war could go, all the way to World War III, but that if it goes bad, they're just going to dump it all on Putin, get rid of him, and say, oh no, the bad guy's gone. That was sort of what he was told. And that's very interesting to me, to add to what Felchinsky says. Because a lot of people they put it all on Putin. But the system is a system, and Putin is a representative of something that's evil, that's larger than just one person. Because one person isn't responsible for all this. This is a system.
Right.
And bodyguards are good sources of intelligence.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, especially when they're the driver and the bodyguard, right? So they hear everything in the car. Right. They're hearing the phone calls. They're hearing the guys meeting in the back of the car. Yeah.
I found that out the first time I was in Ukraine after the bomb went off in the Parliament Hotel, because before the bomb went off, I only had 3 bodyguards, and after the bomb went off, I had 12 bodyguards. And we were all sitting around talking. Most of them, I was actually surprised, most of them actually spoke English. I would say out of the 12, at least 8 or 9 of them spoke English. There was just a few that didn't, but they were all giving me dirt about everything that was going on around that I had no idea of. For example, that bomb that had went off was not the only bombs that were going off in Kyiv at the time. So yeah, bodyguards are a great source of information. All right, what's the next question?
Next question is for you, Lee. Why do you believe that the USA will not draft soldiers? Don't we still need more troops after COVID?
No. In fact, since Trump has taken office and since Hegseth has removed the woke leadership, folks signing up for the U.S. military are at all-time records. And people who don't make the grade or have the testicles or even the testosterone to do it, the U.S. government's going to test to make sure that you do, or the U.S. military is. So Pete Hegseth wants testosterone levels from everybody in the military. I'm not sure what he's going to get from the females, but if they're in special forces, they probably have testosterone too. But anyway, I don't think there's going to be a draft. We would never, if a war started to the point of where we needed a draft, by the time we got the people to the field, it would be too late. I don't. The U.S. government wants to fight wars with weapons. It's like General Zenny from the Marine Corps told me when I worked for him. I set up the warfighter lab at Quantico for the Marine Corps, and General Zenny, the first day I met him, one of the things he said that impressed me, he said, "Son, you never send a Marine where you can send a bullet." And he said, "I want you to make weapons go as far and as fast and have as much lethality as possible so as that none of my Marines are in harm's way any more than they have to be." He said, "The better and the further away that you can kill them bastards, the better it is for my boys."
And imagine what drones do now.
Right.
How you can
I was
kill
gonna
80%
bring that-
of the enemy
Right.
without
And that was
drones.
right at the
gonna
beginning
put
of, this is in 97? Was it 97, I think it was?
I was
So-
going to bring that up on the broadcast. I didn't do it, but I'll do it now because we got a few minutes left. The new Ukrainian drones, Jeff, the new iteration of them, 3,500 kilometers.
Good grief.
The wings have additional fuel tanks on them. 3,500.
Well, one thing I run by Lee on this with the drones is that people, the Ukrainians, are now using World War II type aircraft to shoot down drones.
Yes. Well,
And
they were.
I'm thinking, does this suggest an evolution to drones getting bigger and getting more like World War II aircraft?
No,
Is-
it's the fact that the Russian drones were slow enough that you could do it with a World War II aircraft because they were pusher propellers. And so a World War II aircraft was capable of maneuvering and maintaining position so as that a man with a rifle could take it out. That's not happening anymore because the Russians are now putting jet engines on those exact same drones and increasing their velocity to over 300 miles an hour, and the World War II plane is worthless against that. So the number of propeller-driven drones is dropping because of the fact that the Russians have figured out that that's how the Ukrainians are shooting them down, and they're now using the jet engines. And the jet engine, I can't remember the manufacturer, but as soon as I heard it, I knew it because I have a friend of mine that does research in jet engines, and he demonstrated a bunch of these small jet engines that they put out a couple hundred pounds of thrust. They're not going to move a fighter jet, but they'll move you across the lake or something, or in a go-kart. But it's a commercially made jet engine that they're using because it has a very unique sound to it. The turbine.
Are we headed towards a thing where we have something a third the size of a fighter jet that's piloted remotely that can intercept?
We already have it.
Yes.
We already have it. We don't have it. The Chinese are experimenting with this.
Yeah.
The Chinese have been testing these out in the Xinjiang desert. You heard that from Mr. Wang. I can actually pull up and show you where they've got them.
They've been testing them out there.
Yep.
Yes, and that's a very interesting thing
The
because
U.S. is working on it, but we haven't deployed it yet.
and when you can get it where AI can pilot it, where
Yes.
you don't even need a human pilot. I
Yes.
mean, that's
now
really
the who was it? There was somebody else. I don't know if it was Turkey or somebody else did it a couple of months ago. It was the first time that they had flown a complete. I think it was Turkey. Had flown a complete AI drone. It takes off. It searches an area. It looks for the targets and it attacks them autonomously. And they actually flew two of them together. I think Turkey was, and it was the company. I don't know if it was the same company that does the Bayraktar, but they were the first ones to do two autonomous aircraft flying together on a mission in a fixed wing of that size. The U.S. has done it in small drones like swarms and things of that nature, but of drones that size, no. We've got them in testing, but we haven't deployed anything. All right, questions?
Next question. Do you think Turkey will participate as a NATO member in any possible NATO war against Russia over the Baltics and Poland, or will they stay neutral? They can't stay neutral. If they're a NATO country, they have to respond.
They're obligated.
Yeah.
No, wait a minute. Say that
Under
again.
Article 5. The question was, is there a reason... I'm sorry. Do you think Turkey will participate as a NATO member in any possible NATO war against Russia over the Baltics or Poland, or will they stay neutral? And my answer was they can't stay neutral. Under Article 5, they're obligated to respond.
No, and I think
but-
that they
but-
would
no, wait,
love
wait,
the opportunity.
They're only technically they're not obligated to respond. If you enact Article 5, not all NATO countries have to respond. They can respond at the level of which they so choose.
Right.
So if Turkey just says, well, here, we're going to send you one Humvee, that's it. They contributed. They've met their obligation. Hell, they could be like Obama and send Humvees that don't even run.
What most scenarios of an attack, we've talked about Next War Poland, which is a war game made by GMT. What you see in that game, which is they very carefully studied what would happen, is there's no Turkish troops being sent to that front. It's first things that come are the rapid reaction forces, which is special forces units from Italy, France, UK, United States, things that you could fly in, light infantry. Then you've got heavier tank formations coming out of France, mechanized formations, and the Americans coming in with heavier formations. That's kind of what your order of battle looks like. Turkey would not be responding there because Turkey's on the Black Sea, and Turkey has its own border issues in the Caucasus area. So you would have maybe Turkey talking to Georgia about bringing troops into Georgia to the Russian border, things like that nature, because then Turkish troops could help defend Georgia, for example. Turkish troops could react if there's Russian troops in Armenia, for example. The Russian Navy in the Black Sea might be engaged, but that depends on whether the war becomes either settles down quickly or becomes a protracted war, right?
For reference, here's those jet drones that the Chinese are using. These are old.
The Russians, you mean?
No, the Chinese are using these.
Okay.
This is out in Xinjiang.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. All right, hold on. Let me see if I can get you a picture of the Russian jet drone.
These are the YJ6s or whatever they are.
Yeah.
These are based on
No. I'm talking about
MiGs.
the one the Russians are using, not that one.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
These are the ones based on the old MiGs the Chinese are experimenting with out there.
Let's see if I can find it here. Actually, let me do it this way. So that'll be this one. So this is what they look like. This one's got a prop on it, but the new jet drones pretty much look just like that.
Are they using the same airframe?
Pretty much. It looks like a Shahed. I've only seen a couple of them, and one looked like a Shahed, and the other one had more of a RQ-170 look. Didn't have the nose out on the front of it. It was wedged all the way to the front. So I've seen two different types so far with jet engines, but that's the most common one that I've seen is the one with the wedge, not with this nose. I don't have a picture of the other one right yet, but that's the pretty much example of what it looks like.
Interesting.
All right, next question.
Did you guys know that the Belgians and the Swedish were practicing landing on highways?
Well, that's an old American trick. One of the reasons
It is.
Eisenhower
That's why
got the money for the
that's right.
freeways in the United States was to land strategic bombers on them in a nuclear
That's
war.
right.
Yeah.
And we still can. Yeah. The same thing with the Autobahn in Germany.
And we've
land-
actually, on my simulator channel, we've actually flown and landed on those highways to show people where they are and how difficult they are to actually land a fighter jet on those runways. In fact,
they're not landing. They're not landing fighter jets, my friend. They're landing A400s on these things.
Oh no! A couple of these runways you can't get an A400 on.
Oh yeah, sure.
They're a 2-lane highway going through the freaking woods. If you go 10 feet off of either side of the highway, you're going to be part of a tree. So
Yeah.
and in our simulation of the Russians attacking and flying in and trying to take the Suwalki Gap, even if the fighter pilot was in the cockpit and the jet was running and he was setting at the end of the runway, by the time that he turned on all of his electronics and plotted a course to the middle of the closest point of the Suwalki Gap, he got there a minute and 28 seconds after the last place had already been taken. So the last helicopter had already been on the ground almost a minute and a half before the first NATO fighter could show up. And that was even if he was setting on the runway. I gave NATO the best scenario I could for something, for them to respond. And the best I could do at full afterburner was a minute and a half late. All right, what's next?
Next, do you think Trump will sign the Lindsey Graham sanctions bill on Russia that just went through the Senate? It's hard to say. I would assume so because he recommended that Iran was to be added to the bill, and it was. So it passed. Next question. Do you think that Trump Jeff, you can answer this. Do you think that Trump still gets impeached? What kind of problems do you see arising out of an impeachment? Pretty sure Vance is a communist. Yeah, well, not exactly, but yeah.
Trump is going to be impeached. The Democrats have said that they are going to impeach him. You have the matter of the Epstein matter to resolve. You have the matter of the war in Iran and whatever other illegalities the administration, there's a number of things the Democrats are claiming are illegalities. By the time you get to impeachment, the fiasco of the Iran war, which Trump did not consult Congress before he went with Israel in this attack on Iran. And he didn't have public support. He didn't have congressional support. And of course, we have this divided government. We have this system of checks and balances where the Congress has the power of impeachment. If the president does something Congress doesn't like, and that includes Republicans in the Senate, Republicans are going to might be glad to remove Trump at this point. Republicans in the Senate might find him guilty, depending on how it's handled by the Democrats. If the Democrats make a more bipartisan appeal in their justifications to getting Trump, rather than the more partisan kind of things they did when Trump was president in his first term, it might very well succeed. They impeached him twice in his first term. He's very impeachment prone, as we have seen. I think there's a possibility not only of impeachment of Trump, I think there's a strong possibility with this war going badly that they will remove him from office, because they'll give a legal reason, but the real reason is they'll feel he's irresponsible as a leader, or maybe he's a little past it in terms of the way his brain is working at his age. There might be a number of things going on there to remove him from office. And of course, you asked about the vice president. I am concerned about Vice President Vance's pro-Russian, new
Curtis
kind
Yarvin.
of right, Curtis Yarvin
Yeah.
kind of influences, Peter Thiel and all that. I don't, Thiel has made anti-Russian pronouncements more recently, but these people, these tech people and the people behind the vice president, I'm worried about them. Obviously, I don't think he's a communist, but I think he may be misguided on a lot of things.
Yeah. Next question. Will Russia be able to make mass mobilization, considering a lot of its youth is moving abroad to countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, and staying long term? You can see that they're actually the Russians are trying to button that up, the coming mobilization, because they're closing the borders from the Russian side. So they're trying to stop people from fleeing in that respect. Also, what you have in Russia now that you don't have in Western countries, we're simulating this, as in by like computer models, we're simulating this, which is not really effective. What the Russians are doing, they're actually doing hands-on.
They're making people come into recruitment centers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
they're doing
mobilization
hands-on
centers. Yeah.
Yes. And they're drilling for this. They're taking over schools, they're taking over churches, if you want to call them that, KGB churches. They're taking over gymnasiums, they're taking over community centers in Russian cities across 5 regions, and it's probably even more than that. That's just what we know about. And they're doing mock mobilization drills because they need to be able to, when the mobilization comes, and
within 60 days.
They're 60 days from now, they're looking at 500,000 at the minimum. At the minimum.
Now Medvedev just gave a speech where he denied they were planning a mobilization. He called it a NATO,
because you can believe him, right?
Yeah. Well, because before every mobilization they denied it. Let's just put it that way. So you can't believe anything that comes out of their mouth. They're lying even when it doesn't make sense, if only to stay in practice. But they are a failing state. I think the Suvorov interview with Delphi in the Baltic states, it's done in Russian. It's very much worth seeing, because it's absolutely, he's saying, look, and he's a very close follower. He's a former Russian Soviet military officer and a GRU spy who defected to Great Britain during the Cold War. And he's saying, look, he says, I can't believe we're seeing it, but in this war, we're seeing the degeneration of the Russian military and the Russian state. We're seeing a failure in leadership that's unprecedented in Russian and Soviet history. We've seen a lot of problems in the Soviet and Russian history in terms of military operations and military affairs. They've lost a lot of wars, or they lost a lot of battles, and even in the wars they've won. But this is something special. And I think Suvorov makes a really good case that this is not something they can easily come back from. But then he says, they haven't lost yet. He says all these bad things, and he says, oh, it's not over yet. Just like the Ukrainians do, because Russia has had tremendous failures and come back and won in wars, because they've, after getting it right by shooting and arresting enough people, things start to work again. So I'm not super confident they can do that, but they're trying. So anything is possible, really. And with the mobilization, if the Russian people put their shoulder to the wheel, and the government reacts to this criticism by arresting the right people, not scapegoats, which I think is what they've largely arrested so far, that you could see the situation improve for the Russians.
And I think you made a great point the other day. When it comes to a wartime economy, it's different here in the West. We would treat it differently. But in Russia and in China, they don't have to pay their people.
No.
They will give them food, or people will work for food or a place to sleep, and people will accept that.
Yeah.
People here won't.
There's another difference which we saw in World War I, because World War I was the first super big war that we saw. Well, the American Civil War was too, where democracies were fighting. The American Civil War, essentially the South and the North had what we would call democratic forms of government. Of course, there were Republican forms of government, not truly democratic, but that's what we call them anyway, where popular opinion matters. Lincoln had draft riots in New York in the Civil War. You had other problems occur for both sides in terms of both the South and the North had trouble getting people to go to the war to fight, because people don't want to go and die in a meat grinder. In World War I, in order to spin it up, and that was quite the meat grinder. I mean, that was just made the Civil War pale by comparison. Civil War was the biggest war
11 million?
in modern
11
history.
million casualties?
20 million people, more than 20 million people died in World War I. Now, I don't know, the civilian casualties weren't as big as in World War II, where you had over 60 million people. Well, some people say 55 million die in World War II, but in World War I, you had this exaggerated propaganda out of the democracies, out of France, which was a republic, Great Britain, and the United States. And that propaganda, to get people to go and fight, you had to say the Germans were the Huns, they were evil, they had Belgian babies at the end of their bayonets. So there's always atrocities in war, but you need to exaggerate, you need to emphasize those atrocities to justify it, to make it a righteous cause, because in a free country, it has to be a righteous cause in order for people to go and make that kind of sacrifice. And in World War II, it was much easier to make the case because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and had done horrible things to China. You had the rape of Nanking, right? And you have the Germans with the way the Germans treated people, especially their atrocities against Jews and Slavs. So you have this thing with democracy that you really have to paint this dark picture. But the problem is that when you do that, when you use the advertising agency superpower to get people to buy into a war, you really get them so excited that you need a Treaty of Versailles. You need to really punish the enemy because they're uniquely evil, right? This is how we ended up with Hitler, is that because of that propaganda, that pro-democratic propaganda and the righteousness, we punished the Germans so badly that we maintained a blockade on them that starved to death nearly 1 million German children, 900,000 German children. And because we maintained the blockade while Germany had already put down its arms. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, dislocating their economy, forcing the Kaiser to abdicate, which he did because that's what Wilson was told him. You have to step down. It was a rape because we had made ourselves so righteous and the Germans so unrighteous. So we always have to be careful, because democracy isn't, this whole train of demonizing people is not easily containable. Whereas autocracies like Russia, they're demonizing us, of course, in their media, and they're doing it out of an autocratic thing. But they're not, because they're not a popular form of government, it doesn't quite work the same way. Their people don't all buy into it the way that in a free country, the propaganda really does get people to buy into it.
Right. Question: what would the U.S. have to do to end this issue in the Middle East, and do we have the capability? We would have to invade, and we'd have to take Tehran.
Change your leadership.
That's how it ends. Yeah, that's how it ends.
Yeah.
So it's
the only way
no
to win.
Way.
Yeah, if you want to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's got to be troops on the ground and a change of leadership. You're never going to do anything with the current leaders. The Islamic regime needs to be replaced by the people.
Yes. If 30,000 North Korean troops are going to be on the move, would it be prudent to take out the planes and trains that are transporting them before they show up on the front lines? Yes. Obviously.
But you have to know war hasn't been declared, that's not prudent.
That's right. Yeah. That would be the other point of that. Question: isn't it likely the U.S., Russia, and China and Iran are utilizing artificial intelligence wargaming models in fighting in both the Middle East and Ukraine, making this the first AI war? Probably. And the Chinese are also experimenting with AI piloting systems and autonomous systems for their drone systems as well. So it's entirely possible. I think the AI aspect, though it is a possibility, it's not quite ready yet. Lee, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I do believe that China is involved in AI. I don't think that Russia is that involved in AI. They're just now getting their hands around or getting a good grasp of drones. They're starting in AI, but I haven't seen anything from them, and I keep watching for something that is, AI from them. They're just not quite there. They don't have the money for the budgets or so on and so forth like China does or the U.S. does, and Iran, I think, is doing things with AI, but the vast majority of what they're doing with AI is generating propaganda. Like the shot down F-35 on the trailer the other day that had 6 axles going down the interstate, but there was no tractor pulling it, and it had a beat up F-35 sitting on top of it. So I think when it comes to an AI war on the battlefield, the winners are going to be first is Ukraine, and then U.S., and then China. But China is working very hard.
Next question is for you, Jeff. A lot of pundits in the West keep saying this is Putin's war. If Putin is removed, as your source is suggesting, what would happen then? Would Russia likely do a new economic policy all over again?
Well, I don't have sources saying that Putin will be removed, but I'm saying that this is a distinct possibility. If I don't, the source, which was the driver, that was back in 2020, and so far this hasn't played out, but it could. And would there be a new liberalization? There could be. I think some of my friends in Eastern Europe are afraid of that there'd be the nice Russians again. But I think that the words of Stalin with his pipe sitting in the Kremlin, Putin has made the statement that I'm not the number one politician in Russia. Stalin still is. What did he mean by that? I think it's that this is what Stalin would say. You can't do another NEP because the first time you did liberalization, it caused Ukraine to break off and split. And you lost the Baltic states and Poland. You lost certain countries, and you might have some influence in Bulgaria and Hungary and Romania and so on. But you lost too much. You do another liberalization, and Russia could end up splitting into 2 countries, having a civil war with each half of that one, right? So they're hearing Stalin's voice in their head because Stalin ended the first NEP and jailed Bukharin and ended up executing him because he said, Bukharin, you're not a real Marxist. NEP is only a temporary thing. They just played a 30-year NEP on us and then attacked Ukraine wholesale. I think there's a lot of reasons why they're not going after Putin. And I think that the reason is that the forces that want to do another NEP have lost political credibility within the system.
I don't understand this next question. This is okay. Kazakhstan, I don't know where that is currently being invaded by East Indians and Africans. Is this just happening all over the world or just traditionally white countries? Can you guys comment on it without getting in trouble? Look, the immigration that is happening into Western countries is happening from African countries, at least from the European side of things, from Middle Eastern countries, from the United States. It's coming from Central and South America, and it's being fomented by the adversaries that want to take down the West. So that's what I can say on it. Question is Putin's dislike for technology involving computers and AI part of the stumbling block for Russia and AI? I think if Russia had AI, I think it would probably, honestly, I don't think they would develop it because of the things that Jeff talks about, the kleptocracy. It would just get stolen. The money would never be there where it needed to be for development. And it would just be, it would end up just being a mess. That's my opinion on it.
Yeah, some gamers in Russia would have some nice servers in their houses.
Yeah, that would be about it. Right, that's it for questions. So.
All right, any thoughts, closing comments, Jeff?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we're going to see this question of would the system remove Putin and try a new NEP. I don't want to say they won't do it because they could be fairly desperate to recover their economy and to get back into position. But you know what the West is going to do for them to do a mea culpa and say we were guilty. The West is going to demand reforms in Russia. And they're not going to do it like they did before. They're going to press on people. They're going to want to put people on trial for this war. They want to bring people to The Hague, like they did to Milosevic after the fiasco in Yugoslavia in 1999. So I don't think they can do it. I could be wrong, but I just want to underscore that Russia's kind of committed to this course until their system totally falls apart from the degeneration that Suvorov was talking about.
Have you seen the latest trend in Russia on people making videos speaking out against Putin?
Yes, well, I think this has been a famous thing that this is starting to happen. I mean, you got Z bloggers that have been put in psychiatric hospitals that are being given psych medications because they've obviously lost their minds. I think we're at the beginning, but you see this mixed up mix of sort of liberal methods from the Gorbachev period and old Soviet methods. Putin is not behaving as Stalin would. They're still not capable of really adopting going full Stalin, because what Stalin is that it didn't matter who you were. If you were a high party official in the government, in the Central Committee, he would have you arrested in the middle of the night and taken to the Gulag. If you were the wife of somebody who was, Kaganovich's wife, or what is it, Molotov's wife, whichever one, I forget, he threw in the Gulag. You're going after high-level people. Stalin would go after. He had the nerve to go after his colleagues.
And he kept her. He kept her, and after Stalin's death, he brought her back. Right? Who was it that brought her back?
Khrushchev brought a lot of these people back. I mean, Khrushchev really did bring the first wave of reforms. It wasn't actually Gorbachev. And Khrushchev's secret speech against Stalin was, we're not going to eat our own. We're not going to go, the apparatus is not going to go after Communist Party people. We're not going to go after our own people. Well, that was an invitation in a system the only system of checks and balances was Stalin, checking their greed and their corruption. Stalin would check it and say, oh, you've been a bad boy. He would call people in, oh, you didn't do right. And then he would put them in the Gulag or shoot them or whatever. That stopped with Khrushchev. And then you had Brezhnev, and there was no discipline. So this is where the power vertical broke down. And Putin was all about restoring the power vertical. And there was a partial restoration, but they were deceiving themselves. Because I think now you see with Tokayev in Kazakhstan, that's a Soviet republic led by a person who's really a Communist Party official in reality. He took directly over for Nursultan Nazarbayev, who was the leader of the Communist Party of Kazakhstan. So the Kazakh leader meets with Putin, how many days ago was that? And he lectures him on, you have to end this war. And of course, they gave him finally the gasoline that Putin was begging for, but it was an incredible, humiliating moment. So what happened to the power vertical between Moscow and Kazakhstan? There was none. And this, I'm afraid, is what's broken down everywhere. Why aren't more Chechens going to the front? Because the power vertical is broken down. The absolute discipline that Stalin got by murdering his colleagues, sanguinary discipline. You did wrong, I'm punishing you, or your head's going to roll. Literally, it's gone. And that system needs that. And they're incapable of doing it. Although they talk about it and they imagine themselves being that ruthless. They are arresting people. But if you look, it's not Sergei Shoigu and his bunch that probably stole 30 billion worth out of the arms procurement industry.
There's no probably. They did steal it.
I mean, that's what I'm told. An oligarch that I spoke to said, no, they stole. Him and his buddies, they stole 30 billion. So, I mean, if you look at this breakdown of the Communist Party discipline, the system's discipline, and then the fact that they're re-Sovietizing, but they're not bringing back the Communist Party Soviet Union, but they're sort of keeping it as a Russian, the different political parties, which are essentially parts of the former Communist Party Soviet Union. All the political parties there are just basically underground sections of the old Communist Party. The fact that they can't bring it back openly shows you that it's too, and that they can't do it. They can't manage it. And this is why the system is degenerated. If Stalin, this is where you get to Kotkin's biography of Stalin. The first volume is so important because he says at the end, this is the most brilliant part of this book, is he says, none of Stalin's colleagues could have built the Soviet Union. Only Stalin had some kind of a genius for organization and realizing, yeah, he had to kill people, he had to do it a certain way, and nobody would have been willing. Not Trotsky, not Kamenev, not Zinoviev, not Bukharin. None of them would have been willing to do what Stalin did. Stalin had this political instinct to be able to do it. And I don't think the current leaders haven't shown that instinct either. There's only one Stalin, and he died in 1953. So they're screwed.
Can you tell the story of what happened right after Stalin died and who got killed and who got released and the orders that went out right before Stalin died and how one of them reversed those orders and was later executed for crimes against the...
Well, you had, to give you the general situation, the Korean War was going on. And Eisenhower had just been elected president of the United States, of course, a general. And the Korean War had been going on since June 30th, 1950. And it was a meat grinder. And the Chinese army had gone in. So the United Nations were leading, the U.S. was leading the United Nations because the Russians had made a mistake at the UN, and they did a protest where they walked out of the UN, and then everybody voted against them in the UN to go to war with North Korea. So the UN actually went to war with North Korea in 1950. So when MacArthur came there, it was this war. And so we had a unique situation going against China, and there were Russian fighter pilots dogfighting with American fighter pilots over North Korea. Very bloody war. What happens is that Stalin knew that Eisenhower, if he got in, he was going to widen the war if they refused to make peace, because they were refusing. We would sit at this peace conference with these Chinese and North Korean military officers. There was this one annoying North Korean. He would smoke this cigarette and he would let flies crawl all over his face and not move. And it would creep everybody out in the room, but they would never agree to anything.
Creeps me out, and I'm not even there.
It's horrific. Yeah, if you read about the negotiations. So Stalin wanted to let Eisenhower said, if they don't make peace, we're not going to bleed forever from Korea. We're just going to invade China, and it's going to be a world war. They did a study. I think it was in John Lewis Gaddis's book, one of his Cold War books. They did a study, and they said, cost 10 million American lives, allies would abandon us, and it would take 10 years, and it was in I think late 1952. And so Stalin knew this was going on. His spies were reporting to him. He wanted to go out with a bang. He wanted the war. And so in early 1953, after Eisenhower was inaugurated, Stalin was pushing for this war. He was preparing through the doctor's plot. He was preparing the ground to wipe out all of his associates, once again, have a massive blood purge, just like he did before World War II. Before World War II, if you recall, he wiped out a lot of the generals and the colonels. He wiped out a lot of political opponents. He estimated, he said, who's going to be with me and who's going to be against me. He thought of this when this war begins, and he just wiped out everybody he thought it would be against him. He was planning to do the same thing in 1953. And we know this because of there was a book, I've got it here somewhere, written by a Russian biographer of Stalin. They had conversations with Stalin's last surviving bodyguards in the 1990s. And what happened was Khrushchev and Beria were on the list. Beria was the head of this. Actually, he was technically Interior Ministry, but he was really running the secret police. And of course, you have Molotov and Malenkov, and they were going to get wiped out by Stalin. And so they decided to get together because Beria was so powerful. And Khrushchev and Beria, according to the bodyguards, they removed Stalin's bodyguard the night that Stalin supposedly had a stroke. Right. So several historians of Stalin, if you read enough Stalin biographers, going way back. They said there's something wrong with the story about the death of Stalin.
Didn't they send the bodyguard to the Gulag?
No, the bodyguards were removed. Stalin's bodyguards were told to go home for the night, take the night off by Khrushchev. This is the story, as I'm recalling. Now I could go back and refresh my memory, but that's what it says in there, as I recall. And so Stalin didn't know it, but he didn't have any bodyguards that night. Well, why? I think they poisoned him. There was a dinner. Stalin had these late night dinners where they drink and they'd eat into the wee hours. And Stalin would then go into his private quarters and, wake him up, at noon or whatever. He was a guy who stayed up all night and liked to sleep in the mornings like Hitler did.
Like Hitler did.
Yeah.
Hitler he'd be having speeches until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, at dinners or whatever. And all the SS officers are like, falling asleep, but you don't fall asleep in front of that. You don't want to. You don't want to piss anybody off.
Stalin had these parties, and apparently they were supposedly very fun, but he wanted all of his buddies there, all of his deputies there, as many as they could be, when he would have these, when they weren't working late on something big, where all the lights in their offices had to be on all night. But that night they had one of these parties, whatever, and he retired, and he didn't rise, and so they went and checked on him, and he was lying on the floor, supposedly, having fallen down and suffered a stroke in the night. Well, see, part of pulling the bodyguard off is that they couldn't check on him, and if he was having a stroke or poisoned, do anything to counteract it. Well, he wasn't dead when they found him, and of course there was an episode where Beria comes over, and Stalin is conscious enough. He raises his arm and makes an accusing. He points his finger at Beria. And then he just sort of collapsed then, and I don't think he regained consciousness. But and of course it frightened Beria to no end, of course. But I think people there knew that probably Beria had poisoned him and his guards had been removed. I think they knew at the top. And so what ended up then was there was a struggle, and there's one defector who his book, he was a Georgian. And of course, he was part of the Georgian. They purged the Georgians later from the security services, because what happened is Khrushchev played a trick. He knew that Beria had basically tapped all their phones and all their residences. So everything they said was heard by him. So Khrushchev would get together with these people and say, I'm bugged, but here's what we're going to say in front of the microphones. We're going to say, that Beria, he should be the next leader. We got to nominate him. And after so many months, because Beria was hiding, he wouldn't meet with them because he's afraid of being assassinated. So finally, they persuaded him by having these talks in front of the microphones that he was such a great guy and they wanted him. He actually met with them. And once they had him separated in a room without his bodyguard, they had General Zhukov and Timoshenko with submachine guns come into the room, Comrade Beria, you're under arrest, and making sure his bodyguard, panicked and didn't do anything. And they made a movie about this, The Death of Stalin. It's sort of a comic condensed version of this. Yeah.
When I read.
Yeah, I saw it. It's a really good movie. Everybody should see The Death of Stalin.
They what they do is they zoom events that happened.
Speaking of Zoom.
In a matter of months.
Speaking of Zoom.
Yeah, they zoomed. They zoomed the thing that happened in a matter of months. They zoomed it into, for the sake of the movie, they zoomed it into what seemed like a couple days. But I think that whole thing played out over, something like 12, 15 weeks, I think. Maybe longer.
All right, Johnny, you got anything you want to add?
No, I don't. I think it's been a great conversation. I want to thank all the listeners and the watchers for staying tuned in so long. I'm sure we're hitting those nice analytical marks again, and we're not going to be paid attention to. I'm assuming.
You're absolutely right about that. In fact, we've blown the analytical marks away on this one. Average watch time on a video is like 4 minutes. On a long duration video, it can be 10 minutes. We're at 26 minutes and 29 seconds, which is unbelievable. So I want everybody to share this video out on their social media, whatever social media platforms you have. Please go share this video out. We are being shadow banned on X, on this platform, and others. And it is only through you guys sharing this out that people actually get to find out the truth. So if you would do that, we would greatly appreciate it. And Jeff, where can everybody find you? Or Johnny?
Go ahead, Jeff.
J.R. Nyquist blog, and you can look up my books on Amazon.
And you can find me at Dynamic Independence on all of your podcasting platforms, Apple, Spotify, Pandora, however you listen, Google Podcasts, Amazon Alexa devices, whatever. I'm there, Lee's there, Jeff's there, Trevor, Jimmy, Marty, all kinds of people are over there. So that's where you can find all of us. If you'd like to support the work that goes into those podcasts, there is a PayPal link in every program description that's put out. Also at the top of my X page as well.
Also, speaking of Jimmy from Brooklyn, we've got a big surprise coming up in the coming days with Jimmy. So we'll have some broadcasts coming up with what's going on now, and Jimmy will be on board for those. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and we will see you all the next time. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.